When coping with childhood trauma, it can help to realize that you're not the only person who's gone through this really overwhelming experience that's changed the course of your life over the long term. And for all of us as followers of the spiritual path, we all need to become aware of just how much suffering really is going on in the world. If you look around at the things that are happening to people, not just in second and third world countries, but right here at home, you will see the reality. The reality is that in this day and age, suffering is more pervasive than it ever has been. And there are many people who choose to live the ordinary sensual life, to enjoy their life and indulge in pleasures, either because it's that choice to not be, to follow any superior spiritual order or to not become religious, or because they aren't really aware of it, they're ignorant. But even when we succeed in creating the perfect life we dream of, all the best things, a beautiful house and cars and things like that, these days, it's often not without having gone through some immensely difficult, traumatic experience already, like child abuse or bullying. So these things are happening more and more over the century because that is the karma of this planet. It's been getting worse ever since the 1950s, the sexual revolution. Our quality of life has been getting worse because the karma has been shifting, the global karma has been shifting. We're coming out of the Piscean era, entering the Aquarian age, but there's this major overhaul of souls that is happening, and only a certain select people will be able to continue into the Aquarian age, right? The wheat has to be separated from the chaff. Only very pure souls will be able to continue on. So if you pay attention and look around, it doesn't take long before you notice how pervasive suffering is. And if you look into our history, it really has been getting worse. And just the past century, the modern era, has been bad enough. It's unprecedented, the things that are going on, and worse than what we've seen in many centuries ago or a millennium ago. So the suffering is in the lyrics of all the music we hear. If you don't believe the suffering in music, just listen to all the rock bands out there. Just listen to all the rock music, all the metal, bands like Korn or Bring Me the Horizon or Nine Inch Nails. Davis from Korn, for example, was physically abused, sexually assaulted at a very early age, and bullied much of the time in school. In fact, his ordeals were so heavy that he was able to found his entire career on that, on his suffering. That's all he wrote about. Or I should say, that's all he writes about. His whole life is mostly suffering, right? And that's the main thing that haunts his mind, and that's the main theme that he has anything to say about. Some of these rock musicians these days have the worst psychological health in spite of their, material fame and their success. So who do you know who's suffering right now? Every second person you meet has been through at least one major event that totally overwhelmed them, or phase of life. And in North America, 1 in 4 people regularly experience acute anxiety, including anxiety attacks or panic attacks, and they take prescription medication for them. And that same ratio applies to depression too. How many people do you know have chronic irritable bowel syndrome, or get migraines regularly, or are depressed for no reason and they've always been like that? So all the pain we see in this world is supposed to happen because we are at that time. And if you read books like The Aquarian Message or The Doomed Aryan Race by Master Samael Aun Weor, it becomes clear. It's many of the facts come together and all of this is explained. So let's face the reality, because you're not alone. Now let's look at some statistics. Emotional abuse is frequently reported among teens who experience dating violence. 45% in a Canadian survey of 15 to 17-year-olds. 15 to 17-year-olds. This is Statistics Canada. Emotional neglect, feeling unsupported or ignored is also a significant ACE. I think we'll get into what that stands for in a moment. And that's from Cleveland Clinic. North America specifically, primarily US and Canada, exposure to traumatic events. Nearly half of all children in the US are exposed to at least one social or family experience that can lead to traumatic stress and impact their healthy development. That's from Johns Hopkins. 1 in 4 teenagers will have experienced a traumatic event by the age of 16. Compass Health Center. 83% of teens will experience at least one traumatic event in adolescence. Compass Health Center. 19% of teens will experience 3 or more traumatic events. Compass Health Center. Family ill treatment, basically domestic abuse, ACEs. About 61% of adults surveyed across 25 US states experiencing at least one type of ACE, and nearly 1 in 6 reported experiencing 4 or more types of ACEs. CDC. These experiences are strongly linked to higher risks for depression, anxiety disorders, and PTSD in adulthood. School bullying, peer conflict. Negative peer experiences like peer victimization and aggression can have detrimental effects on mental health, including depression and anxiety. Studies show a strong reciprocal relationship between peer problems and mental health problems. PMC. Just under 16% of teens report being bullied or harassed online, and the cyberbullying rates are higher for girls. Compass Health Center. Teenage relationship conflicts, dating violence, emotional abuse in Canada, 2018 data. More than 4 in 10, which is 45% of teens, age 15 to 17 reported experiencing dating violence since they turned 15, with emotional abuse being the most prevalent. 45%. Statistics Canada. All teens who experienced dating violence in that survey reported emotional abuse, either alone or with other forms of violence. Prevalence of verbal emotional abuse, is the most common form of dating violence. Studies consistently show that the emotional or verbal abuse is the most commonly reported form of dating violence experienced by teens, often even more so than physical or sexual violence. In Canada, since 2018, Statistics Canada surveyed that 45% of teens aged 15 to 17 experiencing dating violence and emotional abuse was the most common form, also 45%. And among those who experienced any dating violence, all had experienced emotional abuse, either alone or with other forms of violence. Specific examples included a partner acting jealous and limiting contact, that's 36%, or telling them they were crazy, stupid, not good enough, weird, 22%, or demanding to know their whereabouts at all times, 20%. In the US, the CDC states that approximately 1 in 3 teens are victimized of teen dating violence, which includes physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse. Some sources suggest that as many as 65% of teens report being psychologically abused in dating relationships. And another study from a nationally representative, a sample of adolescents in grades 7 to 12, showed that approximately 30% of people ages 12 to 21 in heterosexual relationships reported experiencing psychological abuse in the past 18 months. A longitudinal study in the Midwest found that 73% of girls and 66% of boys reported experiencing at least one instance of verbal abuse in dating relationships in high school. Defining verbal abuse in this context, verbal abuse in teen relationships often includes name-calling, insults, and put-downs. As I said before, crazy, stupid, not good enough. Threats like harming themselves or, harming themselves, their partner, or others. Constant criticism and belittling, controlling language, like demanding to know where they are, who they're with, limiting contact with friends, family, manipulation and gaslighting, and making the partner question their own sanity or perceptions. That's gaslighting. Intimidation, like yelling, screaming, aggressive tone. The impact of verbal abuse, the long-lasting emotional trauma from verbal abuse can be significant even without physical violence. It can lead to psychological distress, higher rates of depression, anxiety symptoms, and psychiatric disorders, low self-esteem and self-worth, of course. Constantly being deemed, or rather demeaned, erodes a teen's sense of self. Cognitive and emotional regulation difficulties. Research suggests... Okay, actually, we're on to the news section here. So, cognitive and emotional regulation difficulties. The research suggests that exposure to verbal abuse can alter neurological pathways related to stress and memory and impulse control, and increase the risk of unhealthy behaviors like substance abuse, risky sexual behavior, academic problems, difficulties concentrating, lower grades, and increased absenteeism. Or absenteeism in school. A social isolation. Abusers often try to isolate their partners from their friends and family, which further exacerbates the trauma. It's perpetuating the cycle of abuse. Teens who experience verbal abuse are at a higher risk for perpetrating or experiencing intimate partner violence in adulthood, or suicidal ideation. In severe cases, psychological and verbal abuse can contribute to thoughts of self-harm and suicide. Changes in addressing verbal abuse, normalization, so that's the title there. Teens may not recognize verbal abuse as abusive because they might not see behaviors like teasing or name-calling as normal parts of, or rather, they might see behaviors like teasing or name-calling as normal parts of a relationship, or they may have witnessed similar dynamics in their family or peer group. And because they're young, their judgment is not as shrewd, they're new to these kinds of things. It can be hard to distinguish between teasing and verbal abuse. So they're learning from our common behaviors, and if things continue this way, it becomes the norm to be aggressive and abusive, and we no longer call it that. So that's a big problem that's just growing and expanding, developing like a lot of other problems out there.